Good morning, everyone. You're here at the Enterprise as Data Platform panel at DataWeek. We've got a pretty exciting panel this morning. The gentlemen and ladies that you see here have been in the tech sector for a number of years. I'm going to start off by Mr. Todd Goldman. He's the Vice President and General Manager at Enterprise Data Integration for Informatica. Denise Hemke, she's the Director of Engineering at Platfora. And of course, Dimitri Serrato from Layer7 Technologies, and he's the SVP of Business Unit Strategy for Cybersecurity. So in regards to today's panel, it's a small group of people here, so we're going to make it interactive, and we want your participation as well. I wanted at first to give everybody a quick intro from the panel participants. Maybe they can tell a little about themselves and share a little about the job and exactly what they're up to in their organizations. And then we'll start off with the panel questions. And then we'll have about 10 minutes or so towards the very end for question and answer session. So Dimitri, want to kick it off?
I would like to kick it off. So hello, everyone. My name is Dimitri Serrato. I'm with CA Technologies right now. CA acquired my company, Layer7. Layer7 is an API management and delivery platform, so we work with 350 or so customers worldwide, typically larger organizations, helping them take their data that's resident in databases or maybe in applications and expose it out to various developer communities and mobile apps and things of that sort. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Denise Hemke, and I'm a Director of Engineering at Platfora. So Platfora works with large enterprise companies as well. Basically, customers who have data resident in Hadoop and are really challenged to get it out and get it ubiquitous in their environment, so getting access to it to all of their analysts. And so we provide a full stack solution for getting the data out of Hadoop and visualizing it.
Hi, my name is Todd Goldman. I'm the Vice President and General Manager for Data Integration and Quality at Informatica. We're about $1 billion software company that does data preparation, data integration, data quality, master data management. So accessing data from legacy systems to current modern systems to loading it into Hadoop to doing data integration across a wide variety of environments, including ETL, real-time integration, even doing integration of data directly on Hadoop. So we're all about data integration, data preparation.
I wanted to know, Todd, from your perspective, what is the difference with the enterprise data hub of today and the old data warehousing of the past?
How many of you read Gartner at all? Okay, so a little bit. So there's a concept that was introduced by, I think it was Mark Beyer, called the logical data warehouse. And I think what's different is that in the past, people thought about, okay, I've got my data, and I'm going to take it from my sources, and I'm going to dump it into this data warehouse. And just to make it clear, I don't think that's completely going away, but we're seeing a greater level of agility that people expect from that process, but they also expect that I can't wait for that nightly load. I want to be able to get data from different sources. Maybe some of my data is in Hadoop. So they're expecting to be able to have a greater level of agility where they might do reporting off of the warehouse, but also directly off of their operational data stores, as well as off of Hadoop, or as well as data out of the cloud. So what's different is that we're operating in a much more hybrid environment, and the expectation is that all those environments need to be integrated, and I don't want to wait for a year for that project to happen. I expect it to happen yesterday. I expect it to happen or in a progressive, agile process. But I think the other thing is that I think at a conference, we'll see what the approach is. The conferences over the last year, people have been talking about everything's going to Hadoop. It's all going to be Hadoop. And from my perspective, having seen this for a while, that's not going to happen. There's a lot that's going to go to Hadoop, but legacy stuff, it never goes away. Mainframes, they're still there. So what's happening now is that just the expectation and the need to deal with so many more data points across so many kinds of sources and then report off them. The challenge is going to be dealing with the variety of data sources, but also the variety of integration methodologies as well, and underlying technologies.
Sure, I would definitely echo the agility. The thing that I think that we see with a lot of our customers too is really the agility to ask questions in a different way. I think there's a huge insurgence of unstructured data, and from a number of our customers, and even from my own personal past experience, I've seen a lot of developers being able to write to logs in a very unstructured way, and that needs to evolve over time, and you still need to be able to link those trends over time. So as your application evolves, you still need to say that, this particular data point is consistent throughout the lifetime of that data point being created. So whether or not you're looking at something like, what's my API response time, and you're logging that over time, and you want to look at its performance as your application evolves, you have to be able to sort of link that together and also be able to go back and bring new data in a very self-service way. And so that sort of agility and being able to redefine kind of the data points that you're interested in and pull them in to ask questions quickly is another area of agility I think that we're seeing.
Yeah, I think maybe just to, sure, why not, I'll add. So I think that, from our perspective, obviously we each have a unique perspective in the marketplace, and whenever you have a hammer, everything kind of looks like a nail. But we do see, to your earlier point, in terms of the evolution from warehouses to, what is kind of the trend. The trend remains around integration. And I think, Informatica obviously is very deep around integrating data and moving data around. And our company, we come from the world of service orientation, where essentially you create a service facade for the purposes of integration. And I think what will remain true regardless of, what particular kinds of products is that the need for integration will always be there, and the need to be able to move data from one point to another. And I think so long as that exists, I think you'll see this kind of constant flow of innovation around ways to integrate that data, whether it's more traditional kind of methodologies or more modern methodologies like APIs.
What is the integration process like for these legacy companies? To get the data hub, what are the components of it? What is that integration process like?
Well, I think the challenge is just in a lot of it's around understanding legacy data structures and how do you deal with just connecting to the mainframe. I'd argue that the biggest challenge is skill set right now, because there aren't that many people anymore who know mainframes. So we have to hide that complexity from them. But I think it's interesting. It's the same problem going forward. It's actually the same problem with Hadoop, right? It's not like that's simple either. And we kind of, I think the issue that we're seeing is that the underlying technology changes, but the problems really don't. How do I connect to the thing? How do I get data out of the thing? How do I make sense of the data? How do I clean that data? How do I prep that data? How do I combine it in interesting ways that I can do analysis on? Those problems actually really never change. They're just the basic technologies that you're dealing with do. So you end up needing, as we see the market evolve, the newer companies that you talked about, they just don't have to deal so much with classic legacy systems. But if they want to take advantage of data that's out there, in the ether, they still have to deal with lots of different endpoints. It's just that those endpoints are constantly changing. So the fundamentals don't change, but the specifics of, okay, this is Hadoop now, or in Hadoop it's going to change. It's Hive, it's Pig, it'll be Yarn, it'll be Flubbergast, whatever, whatever some weird name they make up that has an animal associated with it. I don't know, but that's. I don't know there's any good answer to that. I just think it's a constantly evolving and changing environment.
Yeah, so we are doing kind of the opposite, which is saying, hey, we've got analysts, and I guess not necessarily the opposite, but it's sort of the other side of the plane, right? It's the top down, your butt up. Exactly. And so ultimately it is about closing that skills gap, right? You have these analysts that aren't SQL experts and don't really understand how to write MapReduce. And so they're challenged by, how do I get the data out that I'm interested in? There are data scientists who really understands the data, wants to make sense of it. And so what we're providing is an interface that allows them to easily go in and sort of, just using kind of standard Excel type functions to do, simple or potentially more complex extractions, or to basically re-describe that data, is to say, what does my data look like? Now let me go in and pull something that's interesting. Let me go pull in a subset of that data so I can start to query it real time and look at it visually and start to look for those outliers, look at those things that I see as unique, and then start to look at that more broadly and start to kind of compare what I'm seeing in a particular area to another area. So if I see certain behaviors in sort of my web transactions, and I also have call center data, I want to look at those two things together. And so you want to be able to see, these are these interesting insights that I'm having in one area. And now, because we aren't creating these sort of silos and we're bringing all of this in to a single application, let me go look at that and look at these particular set of users and look at them in the light of a different set of data. And what is interesting about that same set of users, and can I find some commonalities in their behavior? No, I mean, our interface is, completely drag and drop. There are definitely different roles, right? Those people who are, describing what these files look like, and those might be more of your data scientists, right? But the general analyst should be able to come into a reporting application and say, hey, these are the fields that I'm interested in, and, let me see this in a columnar format. Let me see this, in a line chart. Let me look at this in a different way. Those are the people that really understand, like, what the data means and can really get the right insights from the data. And so we're providing a really easy-to-use tool for them to do that.
Our customers tend to be either data publishers, and their customers are the actual developers that are consuming that data or integrating that data. So the API is just a convenient format for exposing information in an easily consumable way, so that developers can, again, integrate that into whether it's another application or whether it's a mobile app or something of that sort. So again, we don't necessarily cater to the data scientist. The guys that use us are all about how do they make that data more consumable from a developer perspective.
So in terms of the API management, you have a gazillion APIs out there. Developers are using it within the enterprise, building software daily. The APIs change. How does the enterprise go about managing the strategy around their APIs and what developers use in their software?
There is, unfortunately, the option of just doing it themselves. The alternative is to buy a product, which is something we strongly encourage them to do. So, Layer7 and now part of CA, we are obviously one of the vendors in the space, and we offer a platform to essentially govern how they manage those APIs, lifecycle those APIs, get the data in the correct format so that, again, it is consumable by developers or mobile apps or cloud services, so they can kind of bridge the data center and the cloud. So technologies like ourselves, like the ones we offer, solve that pain. And again, make it more manageable and more repeatable and more scalable and more flexible and more secure and all these other type of things.
What is the security? What is the rules that says who can access the data and why they can access it within this enterprise data hub that's being created under Hadoop? And how are those rules administered?
So, again, just talking to each of our audiences. So again, I think there's probably a bunch of ACLs and controls that you put in place for your data scientists. Certainly in our particular case, where an organization is really trying to create a repeatable methodology or approach to making that data consumable by a developer community, could be inside, could be outside, or some kind of integration community. So enterprise architects that are kind of creating these information flows. And products like ours provide a whole variety of mechanisms to authenticate individuals, authenticate other systems, to deal with some of the data privacy and data integrity in terms of the communication, to ensure that the data is, the communication isn't spoofed in transit, especially if the data is being exposed out over the wide area across the DMZ. So there's a variety of capabilities that are inherent in API security and management platforms specifically for that purposes. And I think all of us vary in the degree of security we offer. Obviously, us being part of a security company, we tend to do probably more. And so as a consequence, customers that care about security more, like government agencies, big financial services companies, tend to favor more secure API management platforms.
So this is something we've seen a lot. This issue's come up a lot at banks. And in fact, there's some banks on Wall Street that have said, well, we're not implementing Hadoop until we solve this problem. And in our case, this is where we're able to meld I'll call it legacy technology. I don't consider data federation to be that legacy, but the ability to provide a federated layer on top of Hadoop that then you have your access control go through that to say, well, who can access what data in the Hadoop cluster. But I think, on top of that, Edward Snowden kind of proved that that your security is only as good as your personnel, right? So when you've got 20,000 people who have access to supposedly secure CIA data, well, you're putting yourself at risk. So still a lot of the issues we're seeing on the security side, there's clearly the idea of having data federation or the ability to on-the-fly mask data. So these are some of the technologies that we're applying on top of Hadoop to help solve that problem, but obviously doesn't solve the internal problem of you better vet your employees pretty well.
So one of the things you brought up, Edward Snowden and the leaks said Booz Allen Hamilton, and if you look at Daniel Ellsberg, he came out of the RAND Corporation. It seems that private companies have a lot of securities and HIPAA certifications that you have to go through. You have security certifications, terms of service that we have to publicize, privacy policies that we have to publicize. But when it comes to government, those things don't simply apply. They can get whatever they want. So our data is much safer, I think, in the hands of private enterprise than it is in some cases in the hands of the government. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
So think about Facebook and the APIs they've exposed. And it was really interesting. It really didn't get big play here, but so my wife's French and she reads Le Monde, and they did a little experiment where they said, okay, let's find all the Jews in a 4-block area just to see, because they knew it would be controversial. And it, you know, and it was. I mean, and you could go into Facebook and find everybody who said, well, I'm Jewish. And you know, in a country that has a kind of has a history with Germany right next door, right? It was obviously it's a very sensitive topic for them, and I think that there's a lot of queries that you can do against Facebook. You can combine it with other data. There's a gentleman in the audience who's got interesting IRS data that he consolidates and resells. And I think one of the challenges that you'd have to face is being careful about how he releases that information in a way that somebody couldn't pull it back apart to figure out, well, whose specific IRS data did he aggregate when he sold that. So I think that the big difference isn't the data itself. It's that the difference is the power the government has to prosecute you, which a private company doesn't quite have those same kind of resources and ability, and they can't put you in jail directly in quite the same way. But in terms of the available information, I personally think that you have to be careful about what information you're exposing and really think about it, because the kind of information people put out freely on Facebook, they've got pretty broad rights to the data that you've given them, unless you either don't give it to them or explicitly restrict them. But their policy starts off being very open, and they're not the only ones.
I think it does raise a lot of questions, though, because you do see, the example with the IRS data. It's a lot easier to be able to get access to data that wasn't originally yours because people expose it out and make it available as a set of APIs. A lot of the startups that are here, either in this room or kind of at the show, that's what they're doing. They're consuming third-party data, and they're mashing it up together and then kind of delivering it potentially to a data scientist or packaging it up and selling it. And I think that does raise a whole set of interesting questions about data ownership, data integrity over the wide area and over kind of these multiple hops. And I just don't think, we're far enough along in terms of our tort law or anything else to be able to deal with it. I think, there will be challenges, there will be leaks, and I think, it will be on 60 Minutes, and then we'll figure, and eventually there'll be some actions, but I don't think a lot of them, our congressmen who are struggling even passing a budget are really going to be able to deal with these kind of topics, at least in the foreseeable future.
So, Dimitri, in regards to enriching the data, if I'm running an enterprise app and whatever that application is, that I'm trying to get in data from jigsaw.com, getting in data from Google Places, wherever I can find the APIs, and let's say my developers are clever and they contact a guy who's selling me IRS data, for example, and we can embed that into our enterprise data hub. How would you go about making sure that the data that you're getting, as you mentioned, is going to be, you have the rights to use it? I mean, what is the underlying sources of that data that you're integrating with, and you have a right to copy it and put it in your database? And how do you address that aspect of it?
Yeah, so, so to some degree, a lot of these relationships are going to be bilateral. So when you're purchasing a data set, whether it's an Axiom or whether it's some kind of loyalty program or whether it's a geolocation service, you're literally creating a contract and there's a terms of use implicit in that, and so you're buying the data from somebody, and you're trusting them. Now, if they're dishonest or if they're in some way trying to deceive you, then you may be in a bit of hurt. But I think for the foreseeable future, you're still going to see these kind of one-to-one relationships. They're not going to go away anytime soon. So again, if you're an aggregator of data, if you're enriching it, and if you're creating kind of a third-party offering, you're trusting to some degree that your suppliers of the data, and you'll have a contract in place with them, and that's the way it's going to be probably for a bit of time.
So anyone has any questions from a member of the audience for the panel?
So I just wanted to key in a little bit on what you were saying about the interplay between the traditional role of IT being the gatekeeper of here's the information for the analyst to have versus the new model that's emerging where self-service, I'm going to expose everything to you. So what I'm finding in my organization is that the interplay that traditionally would have happened from the analyst side going to the BI team and saying, here's what I need, it's not happening so much anymore, where now we're finding ourselves saying, well, wouldn't it be nice if we had this? And then we find out later, oh, we did have this, we just didn't expose it to the analyst team. So what kind of trends do you see going there?
Yeah, and so what we're seeing there is really like leveraging the Hadoop data reservoir, like providing that ability to get data into Hadoop and then get it out in a really self-service way. So having a common definition of what these things are, I think makes a lot of sense, and we're seeing that as well. So you're kind of describing that data set once, but really then ingesting that into different reports, people can look at that in a different way. And so even with developers, we've got a company that's a large gaming company. A lot of them are getting their data into the log files, but even though they might be like a C++ developer, they don't know MapReduce, so they can't get it out. So with our application then, they know they've just written this to the log, and then they know that they can then come into Platfora and say, hey, let me pick up that new element that's now there and start to ingest it and start to make changes to my behavior, or as a product manager, start to evaluate my feature based on this data that I'm now have effectively near real-time visibility to, because I've seen it work its way through the entire flow.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the panel members. Thank you, Dimitri, Denise, Todd, for being on the panel. Greatly appreciated. And we'll see you around the show.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.